Hi, it's Future from Sewmate. Welcome to my channel. If you want to see how I make this beautiful puffed sleeve peplum wrap top, please stay tuned. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do, and make sure to turn on your notification bell so that each time I upload new videos you get notified. You will need your basic bodice block to do this. I've got a tutorial on this channel on how you can make one. I'll leave a link in the description below and a link above as well. So starting with the back, trace around your block up to the waistline, marking all the notches and the dart. Lift your block, draw in the dart, square in your waistline. So we're going to be lowering our neckline at center back by 2 centimeters and widen our neckline by 3 centimeters and applying those changes now, squaring along the edges like I'm doing here. With your curved ruler, connect these 2 points to form our new neckline. Now adding my seam allowance at the top 1 centimeter. Now for neckline contouring, we're going to go down by 0.5 centimeters at this point, put a mark, and join this new point to the shoulder tip with a straight line like I'm doing here. So this part of our pattern is no longer included. At the shoulder tip, we're going to come in by 1 centimeter, square a line down, join this new point back to the armhole like I'm doing here, and transferring our notches back. So this part is no longer included in our pattern. We're going to be closing this dart, so taking it out from the side seam 3 centimeters and joining this point straight to the underarm point. So this part is no longer included as well. Next, we're going to go up 2.5 centimeters from the waistline at center back, put a mark, join this point with a straight line back to the side seam like I'm doing here. So this is for our back shaping or contouring, whichever you want to use. Adding a seam allowance 1 centimeter. So this part is no longer included. So center back is going to be on fold, and adding my grain line parallel to the center back. Now labeling the pattern, back top, cut 1 on fold, and I put my initial. Cut around your pattern. And our back pattern is finished. Now we're moving on to the front. Make sure to leave enough space for yourself at the front for the wrap top, okay? So trace around your block as usual, making sure to mark your dart and make sure to mark your bust point. Draw in your dart like I'm doing and square in your waistline. Now we're going to extend our waistline a little bit further for the wrap top, okay? Outlining my seam allowance for the side seam there and just measuring from there, making sure to skip the dart. Whatever measurement we have to subtract 5 centimeters from it and add to the extension. At the extension point, go up 5 centimeters and put a mark. So now coming to the center front, we're going to lower it down by 10 centimeters and widen the neckline by 3 centimeters like we did with the back. And we're going to come in at the shoulder tip 1 centimeter like we did with the back as well. Applying those changes, squaring a line down at the shoulder tip and connecting to the armhole like I'm doing. Transferring the notch across, so this part is not included anymore. Going in 3 centimeters, squaring a line down. Going down at center front 10 centimeters, putting a mark. Joining all these 3 points with a nice curve like I'm doing here. Now coming down to the neckline, we're going to come down by 0.5 centimeters like we did with the back. Put a mark and join this point back to the shoulder tip. This part is not included in our pattern anymore. And we're going to go ahead and form a 1.5 centimeter dart to avoid gaping. for our top, like I'm doing here. Make sure to connect everything back to the bust point. And we're going to have a panel line here, so just go midway and just draw a straight line back to the bust point again. So we'll be cutting through this line and transferring this little dot onto the line, which is our princess line. And we're also going to be cutting through our waistline dot as well to form our princess line. Adding 1 centimeter seam allowance to the extension there, and at the bottom of our waistline, okay, 1 centimeter. Labeling my pattern pieces, center front panel, cut 1 pair and I put my initial, and side front panel, cut 1 pair and I put my initial as well. Adding a grain line to the center front panel parallel to the center front, and another one to the side front panel parallel to the center front as well. Cut around your pattern like I'm doing to remove excess pattern paper. Now we're going to go ahead and close this little dot that we formed here, at the same time opening a dot at the shoulder like I'm doing here. So just cut through to the bust point but not through it. So closing the dot, tapping everything down like I'm doing here. Correcting the curve for the neckline. And now I'm going to add a seam allowance for my neckline here, 1 centimeter. Now cutting out the waistline dot like I'm doing here to form our princess line, and cutting around the pattern pieces. Next we're going to get our straight ruler and correct this pointy part, and get the curved ruler and correct this pointy part as well. We don't need any pointy parts. Cutting around the pattern. Next, get a fresh pattern paper and we're going to go ahead and add joining seam allowances to our princess line, okay? I forgot to add notches to my princess line before I cut it through, so I'm just going to use this scissors symbol that I added here to put my notches there for joining notches. Now tap everything down like I'm doing here, and adding 1 centimeter seam allowances to the panel lines, and transferring the notches across to the edge. Cut around your patterns. So next we're going to go ahead and measure along the waistline for both pattern pieces and write down the measurements. We'll be using this to make our peplum or our frill. So for the front measurement, we're going to add the 2 measurements together and write them down. Then we're going to do the same with the back pattern. Just outline your seam allowance there, and we're going to measure between the center back and the seam allowance point and just put the measurement down. So get the front measurement and multiply it by 2, and get the back measurement and multiply it by 2 as well. Add them together. Subtract 2.5 centimeters from this amount, which is our stretch factor, and divide everything by 6.28 because I'm going to be using a full circle skirt. So whatever measurement you have for your back and front pattern pieces, multiply that by 2. Subtract 2.5 centimeters and divide by 6.28 to get a full circle skirt radius. Now get a fresh pattern paper, draw a straight line on one edge like I'm doing, and square another line on the other end like I'm doing here. Then from the corner here, you're going to go ahead and put in your radius and just pivot your ruler across using that corner to put in your radius measurement all the way around. Mine was 20 centimeters. Then you're going to put in the length of your peplum from the radius circle there, going all the way to the other side. So mine is 25 centimeters, so measuring from the radius circle going round 25 centimeters. And with my curved ruler, I'm just gonna be joining all these points together and smoothing everything out nicely like I'm doing here. Now adding my waistline seam allowance 1 centimeter and my hem allowance 1 centimeter as well. Labeling the pattern piece, top frill, cut 1 on 4 folds, and I put my initial. I've got a tutorial on different circle skirt patterns. I'll put a link in the description below and a link above as well if you want to have detailed instructions on how you can do this. Cut around your pattern. So my frill pattern is finished. Now I'm moving on to making the ties. Get a folded pattern paper and measure 60 centimeters along the fold line. Put a mark, square a line up one end, and then measure 5 centimeters along the way for the 60 centimeters length. Close the rectangle, so 60 by 5 on a folded pattern piece. Adding seam allowances right round 1 centimeter on one side and at the top, and one end we're going to put 1.5 centimeters, which is equivalent to whatever seam allowance you have on your side seam. Cut around the pattern. Open your pattern piece, and we're going to transfer all these lines to the other side like I'm doing here. Labeling the pattern, outer tie, cut 2, and I put my initial, and adding the grain line in the center. So our outer tie pattern piece is finished. Now moving on to the inner smaller ties. Get a folded pattern paper again, and we're going to repeat the same process. Now for the smaller ties, I'm going to make a rectangle of 25 centimeters by 2 centimeters, okay? 25 by 2. Adding seam allowances 1 centimeter right round, and one end I'm going to put 1.5 centimeters because I'm going to be attaching them to the side seam as well. Open the pattern and transfer everything to the other side like we did with the other bigger ties. Labeling the pattern, inner tie, cut 2, and I put my initial, and adding the grain line in the center of the pattern. Cutting around the pattern piece. So that's it, our inner tie pattern's finished as well. So we're also going to be using this gathered puff sleeve pattern with this top. I'll leave a link in the description below and a link above as well. So now our pattern pieces are finished, and now we're going to start with sewing. Now moving on to sewing our peplum top. What you need are your completed patterns, your fabrics, and your cutting tools. For the fabrics, I'm going to be using this cotton satin and also the organza fabric. For the organza, I'm just going to be using it on the sleeves, okay? So now let's move on to cutting. Now all our pattern pieces are cut and ready to sew. So we're going to go ahead and do this in many steps as we do all the time, so that we can finish this as quickly as we can. So first, grab your inner ties for the blouse, and we're going to go ahead and fold them back like this. Pin them along. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and sew from the fold line all the way to the corner, pivot your fabric and sew along this open edge here. Leave one end and sew on, okay, for both. And I'm gonna put this on the side. Grab the longer ties, which are the outer ties, and we're going to do the same. Fold them back on themselves like this. Pin along one edge and the longer edge as well. Take them to the sewing machine and sew from the forward line to the corner. Pivot your fabric and sew along this long open edge, and make sure to leave one end unsewn. Let's do that to both as well. Next, we're going to go ahead and get your center front piece and the side front piece, and we're going to get the side front piece and lay it on top of the center front piece, right side facing, and we're going to pin along the seam line here, matching your notches. Put it on the side, grab the other pair and repeat the same. Now we'll take this to the sewing machine and sew along the panel line here, okay? Putting this on the side as well. Now grab your frill part and we're going to go ahead and hem it. So just go ahead and overlock the whole bottom part, and then we're going to go ahead and fold it back 1 centimeter and just top stitch it right round. Let's go and do all these stages now, and then we'll come back here. Okay, so I've done all that. I've sewn the panel lines here for the front pieces, and I went ahead and overlocked them, and I also ironed them nice and flat. Okay, then I went ahead and hemmed my frill, overlocked everything and hemmed it nicely, looking nice and neat. Then I also went ahead and sewn all my ties. So now we're going to go ahead and just snip through the corners here, just to avoid bulk. Now we're going to go ahead and turn everything to the right side. Now take this to the iron and iron them nice and flat. Okay, so I went ahead and ironed all my ties out nice and flat, and they're looking all good. So I'm just gonna put them on the side for now. Next, grab your back top piece, lay it on the table with the right side facing up, and we're gonna bring our 2 front pieces, lay them right side facing down, matching the side seams and the shoulder seams. Now pin along the shoulders. Now we'll take this to the sewing machine and sew along the shoulders and overlock them, okay? And I'm gonna put this on the side for now. Now grab your 2 sleeve pieces. We're going to go ahead and sew with our gathering stitch 2 rows of stitching from the underarm to the underarm, all the way around within our seam allowances for both. Let's go and do that now. Okay, so we've joined our shoulder seams. So we're going to lay our top with the right side facing up like this, exposing the armholes, and we're going to grab 1 sleeve first, and we're going to go ahead and just gather it at the top to fit the armhole here, okay? Now repeat same with the other sleeve. So now we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and sew along the armholes and overlock them. Let's go and do that. Okay, now so that's done. We've sewn on the sleeves and I also went ahead and overlocked the seam. So now I'm just gonna go ahead and turn on the top, right sides facing and matching the side seams. Now pin along the side seam from the waistline all the way to the sleeve hem, making sure to match all the notches and the seams. Grab one longer tie and sandwich it between the two layers of the right side of your top at the side seam just after the seam allowance for the waist. Now take this to the sewing machine and sew along the side seams from the sleeve hem all the way down to the waistline for both sides. When we finish that, we're just going to give this a double turned hem for both sleeves. Let's do that. Okay, now so that's done. So the next thing we're going to do is to sew on the frill to the waistline. So what we're going to do is to lay our top on the table with the right side facing up like this. Grab your frill piece and we're going to lay it on top of it with the right side facing down, meaning right side facing. Now go ahead and align your waistline seams and pin along as you go. Okay, so now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and just sew along the waistline seam all the way to the other end, and we're going to overlock it. Okay, let's go and do that. Okay, now so that's done. So the next thing we're going to do is to just finish off the end of our top here, all around the neckline and the front of our peplum. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and do a double turned hem all the way round. Okay, let's go and do that. Okay, so that's done, and now we're going to go ahead and finish off positioning our ties and sewing them on. So for the first tie that I put on the side seam, to put a bigger one for that one, the outer one. Okay, now we're going to go ahead to the opposite side, take this end and overlock it, and we're going to align it right here at the edge, pin it along. Now you sew with a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance here to attach the tie to the top. When you finish that, you're going to roll this over the seam allowance like this, and we're going to edge stitch right around it like this, okay, to put a box. When we finish that, we're going to get the small ones for the inner pieces, and we're going to go ahead and overlock the edges, and we're going to repeat like we did with this one for the outer one. So with a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance, and then roll it over and sew a little box here, edge stitching in the middle. Okay, then we're going to go to the opposite side. Make sure it's exactly the same position with this, the middle somewhere here. Overlock the edge, and then you're just going to go ahead and sew it onto the seam allowance here. Okay, let's go and do that. Okay, now so that's done. I finished sewing on all the ties and it's looking nice and neat. I hope you can see that. And I've done the same with this one from the inside. So that's it. My peplum top is finished and I'm happy with the result. Thank you.